question. How many of you went Black Friday shopping? All right. Now, don't judge. I won't Black Friday shopping. Okay. I was just wondering, because it really relates to what we're talking about today. How many of you like waiting? That's what I thought. That's kind of, because my thought is too, I don't like waiting. And I mean, the only problem with waiting is that I don't get what I want right now. If I could wait and get what I want right now, then I feel like it would be fine. Now, I guess that kind of defeats the purpose of wait. It's kind of like, cross country. I'd love it if it wasn't for all that running. It's kind of the same thing. No offense to cross country runners in here. I know we have a couple. Is it safe to say that we want what we want and we want it now? Is that safe to say? Like, I get tired of waiting on popcorn that takes 2 minutes. And it's something very interesting. And I'll tell you, coming around Christmas season, it gets harder and harder to wait. Because we know at the end of this month we're going to be getting gifts of some sort. Whenever I was your age, actually, whenever I was 6th grade, there was a certain game I wanted. I was a Game Boy kid. And don't judge. But I was a Game Boy kid, and there's a certain game that was coming out that I really wanted. And I asked for it on my Christmas list. Now, when I was growing up, usually you put one thing on your Christmas list, and that's generally what you got outside of the gifts that are like toothbrush and deodorant and stuff like that, which are great gifts. So, I love those gifts. But I wanted, don't judge, Pokemon Yellow. I already had Pokemon Red, my brother had Pokemon Blue, and they just came out with Pokemon Yellow, which is essentially the exact same game, minus like 3 parts. I didn't realize it at the time. But I was like, I put that on my list, and I wanted it. And I wanted it so bad. And then they're like, well, you might get it, it might come, don't worry about it. And I was like, okay. You know what? I really wanted it. So when I went on a trip with my grandmother to Sam's, which was like, and that was an event, by the way. We loved going to Sam's. It was awesome. But I went there, and I brought my money I'd been saving up. And so I got there. It was about a month out from Christmas. And I go, and they had the game. And so I went, and I was like, I got the money for it. My grandmother was like, yeah, go ahead. And so I got the game. I bought it. I came home. I brought my Game Boy with me, just in case. And so I was playing on the way home, and I come in. My mom's like, What you got there? What you doing? And they're like, oh, I'm playing this new awesome game, Mom. It's Pokemon Yellow. And she's like, oh, you got that game? And I was like, yeah, I went ahead and bought it. And she's like, oh, well, I guess we'll just have to take your gift out from under the tree. And I was like, oh, crud. Right, it was, and she just kind of gave me that look, and for that whole Christmas period, I just want you to know, it was like every time she saw me, it was just like, disappointment look. I couldn't wait. I could not wait. I had to go ahead and buy it. And ultimately, it actually cost my mom a lot of headache, getting it returned and finding something else and all that. And I learned if I ever put anything on the Christmas list, I was never to buy it myself. Just a good little heads up for you. If you put it on your Christmas list, don't pre-buy it early. If you don't do Christmas lists, I'm sorry. All right. But, so during this season, during this time of year, it's Christmas time. Usually you're used to hearing about, we're going to talk about Jesus' birth and about coming in and the shepherds and the wise men and all that jazz. And, one thing when I look at this story, I think it's a great lesson in waiting. And we're actually going to be looking at the story of Zechariah. You may or may not have heard of him, but if you have your Bibles or if you're taking notes, we're going to be in Luke chapter 1, starting with verse 5. Okay, so what we're going to do, our stereotypical read-through. We're going to talk about it. Because in waiting, there's actually a lot of learning. Even though we all hate waiting, there's a lot of benefit to learning to, nice try, a lot of benefit of learning to wait. Okay, so here we go. We ready back there? All right. When Herod was king of Judea, there was a Jewish priest named Zechariah. He was a member of the priestly order of Abijah, there we go. And his wife Elizabeth was also from the priestly line of Aaron. Zechariah and Elizabeth were righteous in God's eyes, careful to obey all the Lord's commandments and regulations. Okay, just to give you a little backdrop. At this point, it has been 400 years since the people of Israel had heard from God. 400 years. I mean, I don't know even how many generations that is. But it's that long since they've heard a word from God through a prophet or anything along those lines. How many of you be willing to wait 400 years? Right? You'd be like, no, I'll probably be dead. Yes, you'd be dead. It's a long period of time. And the first thing I want us to think about when it's talking about waiting is when we wait, we still need to honor God in how we live. There's a lot of things we want, and we're going to dive into this a little bit later. There's a lot of things you want. Maybe you want to know what you're going to do with your life, you seniors. You may be thinking, what am I going to do when we're going to college? Where's life taking me? You may be thinking, God, I really want a car. I really want this. You may be thinking, I really want for my mom to get better. I really want, for patience with this. We have all these wants. And while we're waiting for God's response, while we're waiting for God's answer, it's probably a good thing for us to live in accordance with what God wants us to do. Keep honoring God as you go. Second thing I want you to know about waiting. Waiting sometimes does not make sense. How many of you have ever waited and you're like, why am I having to wait? Right? You go to McDonald's and you pull up and you give your order and you pull around to the window and they're like, oh, okay, just pull up for a second. You're like, there's no one in the McDonald's. There's no one in line with me. Why am I having to pull up? Why am I having to? I'm getting chicken nuggets. Those aren't even cooked. I know they're microwaved. And then we have this thing that we're like, why are we having to wait? And there's sometimes this 400-year period. There's no clear answer in the Bible in the sense of like why God waited 400 years, why it was the right time then. But it was a time of waiting. You may not understand, and you may never understand why you're having to wait for something. I want it to sink in. You may never understand why you're having to wait for your parents to get their marriage better. Why you're having to wait to be able to be a part of a group or to be a part of this team. You may never get a clear understanding of it, but while we're waiting, we need to be living for God like Zechariah is doing, okay? So continuing on. They had no children because Elizabeth was unable to conceive. And they were both very old. It's kind of like a theme in the Bible, like every other story about it. Anyway, so they're very old. One day, Zechariah was serving God in the temple, for his order was on duty that week. As was the custom of the priest, he was chosen by lot to, not a person, but like the cast stuff and stuff. Hey, point to me. By a lot to enter the sanctuary of the Lord and burn incense. While the incense was being burned, a great crowd stood outside praying. Okay, what are the people outside doing? Anybody got a guess? They're waiting. They're praying. Thank you for listening. They're praying, but they're waiting. Okay, so they're getting to experience waiting too. All right, so they're sitting outside. They're waiting. While Zechariah was in the sanctuary, an angel of the Lord appeared to him, standing to the right of the incense altar. Zechariah was shaken and overwhelmed with fear when he saw him. But the angel said, "Don't be afraid, Zechariah. God has heard your prayer. Your wife Elizabeth will give you a son, and you are to name him John. You will have great joy and gladness, and many will rejoice at his birth. For he will be great in the eyes of the Lord. He must never touch wine or other alcoholic drinks. He will be filled with the Holy Spirit even before he is born. And he will turn many Israelites to the Lord their God. He will be a man with the spirit and the power of Elijah. He will prepare the people for the coming of the Lord. He will turn the hearts of the fathers to their children, and he will cause those who are rebellious to accept wisdom of the godly." Zechariah said to the angel, so this is like a big load that this guy just gave me, like, here, your son's going to be awesome, you're going to have a kid, this is how it's going to work, it's going to be great, he's going to be great, be happy. And Zechariah says to the angel, "How can I be sure this will happen?" An angel is talking to you. I don't know what the point, where the misconnection is. But he said, "How can I be sure this will happen? I'm an old man now, and my wife is also well along in years. In some translations, it says that he laughed. He's like, whoa, I'm old. This is the kind of thing that happens for old people. Okay? Sometimes we have to wait because we're not ready for what is to come. Sometimes that's where we are. We are at a point where we're having to wait. We don't like it, but God knows you're not ready. Zechariah wasn't ready to hear this news. Hence is like an angel talking to him, telling him he's going to have a child, and him doubting it. Whenever I was in college, when I was 19 years old, and some of you have heard this story, so sorry. When I was in college, 19 years old, I was tired of waiting on having a girlfriend. I never had a girlfriend in my life outside of like the 7th grade girlfriend, which honestly, 7th graders, I don't feel like it counts, because that was one of those things like you want to be my girlfriend? And she was like, yeah. So what do? We held hands at recess, and yes, we had recess, don't judge, and that was it. I didn't even have her phone number. Okay, that's it. I don't count that. That doesn't count. So if you're more intense than that, don't be. Just wait. Wait. Yeah, that's part of it. But no, I was 19 years old. I was a sophomore in college by a year, not by credit, and I was like, man, I am tired. I am so tired of not having a girlfriend. So, I wasn't a floozy or whatever. I started looking around and I was like, okay, she has to be a Christian. That's what one of my standards were before I dated anybody. And so, my brother was married, and his wife had a good friend who didn't go to our school. And we met up all as a group one time, and we were kind of hanging out, and I could tell she liked me. And she was a nice girl, and I liked her like as a friend thing, but I was tired of not having a girlfriend. And so, when I noticed she had interest in me, I was like, you know what? Let's date. Why not? But before I did that, I was like, okay, God. If you want me, and this is kind of how it worked, I was like, God, if you don't want me to date her, then tell me now. Go ahead, just tell me now in the next 5 seconds. Okay, God didn't answer, so we're good. And so we started a relationship, and my wife calls it, who's obviously not Jenny, which was her name, Jenny, the Jenny period of my life. It was a month, and I'll go ahead and tell you, it was an awful month. Not awful as in she hit me with something, no. But she went to a different school, and as soon as I was like, yeah, hey, let's make this official, will you go out with me, that whole thing. And she was like, yeah, cool. I felt super uneasy. I was like, oh no. If you ever say, you ever have that conversation, want to date someone, and then the immediate thought after that is, oh no, it's probably a mistake, okay? And that's where I was. I was like, oh. And then I knew it wasn't right. She's a nice enough girl, but I knew it wasn't right. And then within week 2, we were talking on the phone, not texting, talking on the phone, and she was talking about, that she would like to get married early. And I'm thinking, oh, whoa. Okay, there was a lot of, some of you have the same face. I made that face, some of you. I was just like, no. And it was a horrible month. It was a horrible month. And after that, literally a month to the day, I called her and I said, I don't think this is working. I jumped in. I told her I jumped into this because that's that. And she's doing fine and well. About 6 months later, she's engaged. She has 3 kids, and she's doing great. But yeah, sometimes you're having to, when God says, wait, because you are not ready. And a lot of times we don't like that answer. Like, oh, you're not ready. I'm real ready. I'm ready for a relationship. Most of you, I'd say no. I'm just being honest. Just avoid it till college. Most of you. But it's just one of those things. There's times in our life we have to wait where God's saying, you're not ready. Just hold on. Okay? So that's where Zechariah is. Okay? So, continuing on. Then the angel said, I am Gabriel. I stand in the very presence of God. It was He who sent me to bring you this good news. But now since you didn't believe what I said, you will be silent and unable to speak until the child is born. For my words will certainly be fulfilled at the proper time. Bum, bum, bum. Okay, so he basically says, are you sure? I don't believe you. I'm old. And he's like, God told me. I was standing in front of him when he was like, hey, go tell him this. So what happens? He is not able to speak. He's not able to make noise. Okay, we're not talking about just silent until the baby is born. Generally, that takes a little while. Okay, by reckoning, around 9 months. That's what I've been learning in class. Okay, so it takes a long time. So he, as a result of him not waiting, had consequences. Us, whenever we don't wait on God's time, we do have consequences. We have consequences when we jump into things before we need to. Okay, and the same thing here with him. All right. So, meanwhile, the people were waiting for Zechariah to come out of the sanctuary, wondering why he was taking so long. When he finally did come out, he couldn't speak to them. Then they realized from his gestures and his silence that he must have seen a vision in the sanctuary. Can you just imagine that, by the way? You know, it's like, okay, Zechariah's coming out. He's going to give us some 400 years. We are waiting. And he walks out and he's like, you know, I'm just picturing, because he's like, you'll be silent. I don't know how long it would take you to figure out you're silent. Like, is he like, I don't know. But he comes out and he's straightening it up out there. He's like, okay. And they're like, there's something wrong with him. Zechariah, he even sniffing on the incense. No, they figured it out. Okay, so they figured out, okay, God told him something. Awesome, go away. You're weirding us out. So he goes away. All right, so where were we at? When Zechariah's week of service in the temple was over, he returned home. Soon afterwards, his wife Elizabeth became pregnant and went into seclusion for 5 months. Don't know why. Yeah, there you go, seclusion. So, man, I can't talk to him. Anyway, I guess he just listened. Anyway, she said, "How kind the Lord is," she exclaimed. "He has taken away my disgrace of having no children." That's a long time for him not to speak. That is a long time. Okay, so he's not able to speak. He's reaping the consequences of not trusting God and all that. He's not ready for something. And my thought is this: I wonder what he did. I wonder what he did during that time. He can't talk. It's not like he can send a text message and all that. I guess he could write. I don't know. But I would like to think this. It doesn't say this in the Bible. I would like to think this. I would like to think that he took that time to better himself. Sometimes when we're waiting, guys, even though we're waiting on something else, a lot of you are waiting for that girlfriend or boyfriend. You're waiting for that perfect spouse or whatever, and some of you are thinking, "Whoa, that's way too far off." You'll get there one day where you're wondering when that's coming and all that. While you're waiting, you need to be bettering yourself. How many of you have ever seen the movie Groundhog's Day? Billy Crystal? Okay, good. At least one of you. There you go. The whole premise of the movie is this. Listen up. The whole premise of the movie is this. It is that he goes to this place, it's Groundhog's Day, and every morning when he wakes up, it's the same day repeating over again. Now at first, the main guy, he tries to take advantage of it, right? Because he doesn't understand it, so he's doing all these crazy things. And then after a while, he gets tired of the waiting for the next day, so he tries to end his life, and that doesn't work either, because every time he does, he just wakes up again the same day. And so he gets to a point in this waiting for the next day to come. He's like, well, I guess I'll learn to do some stuff. So he learns to play the piano. He goes and he learns how to help people in other ways. He finds out all the bad things that happened during that week, during that day, like someone choking and someone falling out of a tree. And he schedules his life around helping that person from falling, helping that person who's choking. And he betters himself. And the whole premise of it is that whenever the next day came, he was a much better man than he was the day before. Now for you, while you're waiting, we'll just run with the whole spouse thing, because most of you aren't married. And by most of you, I mean all of them, us, Renee, and you. And we're not married together, we're married to other people. But, newsflash, just so you know. But let's do that. Some of you dream about that. You're like, man, one day, especially girls, guys, they think about it, don't get me wrong, but girls, a lot of times they think about the Prince Charming coming in. They think about how great he's going to be. They think about he's going to be, he's going to be awesome, and he's going to be muscular. He doesn't have to be that tall. He's going to have a beard. You know what? No, I'm kidding. Teresa thought that. That was it. But you sit there and you think about that, but we don't think about, listen up, we don't think about how am I bettering myself? How am I becoming the person that I would want to marry? How am I becoming a better person? If you don't know what you're going to do with your life, most of you don't, and even if you do, a lot of it's going to change. While you're waiting to become that, while you're moving towards that goal, keep growing. Keep learning. Keep bettering yourself. God doesn't want you to sit on your hands and do nothing. God goes, okay, I want you to grow. I want you to learn. I want you to get better. Continuing on. When it was time for Elizabeth's baby to be born, she gave birth to a son. And and daughters whenever I have a baby. And when her neighbors and relatives heard that the Lord had been very merciful to her, they rejoiced with her. When the baby was 8 days old, they all came together. They all came for the circumcision ceremony. They wanted to name him Zechariah after his father. But Elizabeth said, no, his name is John. What? They exclaimed just like that. What? There is no one in all your family by that name. Just so you know, back then, it was important to carry on names. Especially first son, you want to carry on names. And keeping it all in the family as far as names go is very important. And she says, no, it's John. And then, Zechariah, he's kind of like, and that's all he's got. So, no, he can't talk yet. He can't talk yet. It's coming. Don't read ahead. Okay, so it says this. Listen up. So it says, what? They exclaimed that no one in your family has a name. So they used gestures to ask the baby's father, a.k.a. Zechariah, what he wanted to name him. He motioned for a writing tablet. So they had something to write on. Like, bring me a stone. All right, he's like, because they're talking. So he motions for a writing tablet, and to everyone's surprise, he wrote, "His name is John." Instantly, Zechariah could speak again, and he began praising God. Okay, so once the prophecy, once what the angel told him was true, because what did he say? He said he won't be able to speak, until you've named your son John. So he names him, and it's like, he's able to speak, and he starts praising God. It's interesting because during that time, do you think if he was bitter? Listen up. If you think he was bitter during the waiting, do you think he'd be like, oh God, you're awesome, thank you for letting me be able to talk, la la la? Probably not. He'd probably be like, oh man, I'm finally able to talk. Oh, I don't like the color of the house. No, I'm kidding. I don't know what he said if he was bitter, but he wasn't. He praises God. Okay? His son is born. He praises God. And then this happened. Okay? And we're skipping on there. Verse 57 says this. Then, then his father, Zechariah, was filled with the Holy Spirit and gave this prophecy. And I'm not going to read the prophecy because it's long. But I say that to say this. When we wait on God, whenever we have this time of waiting, when the time actually comes that the waiting is over, if we've waited like we're supposed to, if we've kept ourselves honorable to God, if we've done everything right in the eyes of God, whenever that time comes, we're going to be so ready for the next step. As soon as, this happens, as soon as he gets his voice back, God speaks to him and gives him a prophecy. The prophecy, this hasn't been heard in how many years? 400 years. when the time was right, after the waiting period, it was time for God to speak to them again. For the people of Israel, for the wait to be over. Guys, what I want you to think about tonight, what I want to leave you with is like, how are you treating your waiting? Are you being impatient? So think of what we do a lot of times. We assume that waiting is bad. When I was growing up, I hated going to bed early, not because I disliked sleep, but because I felt like I was wasting my day. I felt like if I went to bed before 11 o'clock, there was more I could get done. Now, I wasn't that productive, so I don't really know what I was doing, but it was one of those things like, yeah, I'll read. No. I'll get more TV in. I'll get something in. I'm not going to waste. I get more Nick at Night in because I love Nick at Night. I would get more into my day. And I felt like if I was ever idle, if I felt like I ever stepped back, I was doing something wrong. Our society says that about us today. You have to have something filled. You have to have every moment filled. A lot of you know this experience. A lot of you know how it feels so whenever you quit one sport, or actually not even when you're done with one sport, when you're about 2 weeks away from finishing a sport, another thing starts. So you're double dipping, and then you start into that. By the end of that one, you're already started another one. And it's a year-long cycle, and you never get this time just to be still. And honestly, I think that is wrong. You can go home and tell your parents, and they'll come back and be like, "Come back in." No. Hear me out. Whenever you have no time for anything, you are not making time for God. You are not waiting on the Lord to speak. Oftentimes when God talks to us, it's not through like, "Whoop, don't do that. This is the Lord. Dana, what I want you to do is blah, 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 blah." God doesn't usually talk like that. Generally how God talks to you is in the still and in the quiet. Anybody know why?
So you can hear.
So you can hear. I like that. So you can hear Him. If you think about it like this, if I come up, how many of you ever have a teacher who does the quiet talking while the class is loud? And you have that teacher, like where it's like, no, and don't start being loud, please. But they're sitting there and they're like, "I'll wait on you. I'll wait on you whenever you're ready. I will talk to you." And don't say names. I hear names going out there. "Oh, that's Miss so and so." Because honestly, if I was coming up to talk to you, if I was like, "JC, I want to talk to you," and JC's talking to someone else, or he's on his phone, and I'm like, "Okay, JC, okay, I'm going to take you home, and then I'm going to pick you up tomorrow." And me doing this, I'm yelling at JC because he's not listening to me. Now that's not a true story. That doesn't happen all the time. I do yell at JC every now and then. But if JC's waiting to hear me, if JC is longing to hear me, he's going to be able to hear me when I talk like this. There's a lot of us who expect God to do the whole, pillar of fire, thunderclap from heaven, and we're going to hear you. I'm going to get a 2x4 to the face whenever, and then going back to relationships. Me and Teresa dated for almost 4 years before we got engaged. Yeah, I'm a slow mover. And I was at a point towards the 3-year mark that I was just so ready for God to hit me in the side of the face with a 2x4 that said, "Marry her or don't marry her." That's what I was waiting for. I was like, "God, I just want, that Tommy Boy moment of just wham right across my face." If you haven't seen the movie Tommy Boy, if you're over 13, watch it. It's great. If you're not, when you turn 13, watch it. But I wanted something that was going to be so evident that there would be no doubt. And you know what? God never gave me that. In my waiting, God never gave me a 2x4 that said, "Teresa is your life, go." Whack. God gave me a nice, quiet, yes, I approve. You make the choice, but I approve. When you're waiting, you need to be listening. We're going to talk about next week whenever God answers. But right now, in your life, know that waiting is a part of the growing process. Waiting is essential. If you look at the animal kingdom, last analogy, you have birds in a nest, okay? You have these little birds, and there is a certain point where they get shoved out, where the mama bird's like, get out, you stop your fly. Can you imagine if you're up 50 feet in a tree and you're a baby bird and you're just like, oh, it's not time yet. I'm sick of waiting. I'm going for it. Right? Yeah. Oh. Right? You know what I'm saying? I know that's really sad. No, not the bird. But waiting, growing, listening is essential to you becoming who God wants you to be. Don't be afraid of waiting. Don't get annoyed with waiting. Take advantage of it. Grow in it. Because you're going to have to wait for something pretty much your whole life. But God's timing is perfect. God's timing is perfect for you and when He's going to answer that call. Whenever He's going to answer that question. You heard me? God, I thank you for today. I thank you for everyone in here. And God, I thank you for the times that we are to wait. Whether it's waiting for a car, whether it's waiting for our spouse, whether it's waiting for what we're going to do in our lives, where we're going to go to college, what I'm going to do this summer. God, I pray that while we're waiting, we go to you. That while we're waiting, we take advantage of it, that we grow and we listen. I pray, God, that you help us with that. I pray, God, that you help us with our listening, that we can hear your still small voice, God, that we are so excited to hear what you have to say to us that we're willing to wait and be quiet for your answer. God, as we continue to worship, I pray that you move in this last song. That we think about what we're waiting on. And that we go, okay, God, I'm willing to wait for your answer. I'm willing to listen. I'm willing to be quiet. I'm willing to be still. I'm willing to let you guide my life instead of me just running away with it. Help us to do that, Lord. In your name I pray.